My name is Nicholas Marcus Thompson, and I've been employed with the Public Service of Canada for the past 6 years. I represent 800 workers at the Canada Revenue Agency. When I became a Canadian citizen, I distinctly remember the judge saying that Canada is a place where opportunities are endless. That really drove me to join the public service. I really thought that it would be a welcoming, all-inclusive place. A big part of the problem is the Employment Equity Act. So the act was created to prevent discrimination, right? What the legislation does for visible minorities is that it places all racialized people into one group. So the employer can consistently, now under this legislation, pick out for hiring and promotion any visible minorities group and meet the definition of the legislation. So the employer can consistently pick out one group and then submit their statistics that they've met the legislative requirements. They're exceeding it, as a matter of fact. But that does not include black workers. This is how the systemic issue works, is that you're using the legislation, you're empowered, so you're following the law, and the law is allowing you to leave black workers behind. When we talk about the black class action lawsuit, any black worker can become part of the claim. If we don't stand up today, then tomorrow my children will be subject to the same thing. And the children of many black workers will be subject to the same thing. And that's why this fight is important, so that that can change, so that the public service can be a place where you can join and you could work hard and you could be successful and you could climb as high as you want. That's the public service that we're dreaming of. That's the public service that we're fighting for generations of blacks to come.
So, do you have an understanding of what's going on here in Canada? Many of us who come from Caribbean backgrounds or African, wherever you are as a black person immigrating to Canada, we are tricked and fooled into believing that, hey, Canada is a place of equal opportunity and equity for all, but it is not so for anyone that is black who immigrates here to Canada. You see, just like that Employment Equity Act, it's the same thing with hate laws and anti hate laws that are in place in the code of criminal offenses. I'll say it that way. You see, in the section 319, number 1 and 2, it does point out that anti-hate is against the law and it's a criminal offense when you engage in anti-hate and what have you. But if you go and check this out in the book of criminal sections for Canada, I want you to look in section 319, number 1 and 2. I'm going to point out section 2 because section 2 is specific about hate crime. However, the only group of individuals mentioned there are individuals who endure or have endured anti-Semitism. It says exactly that anti-Semitism is against the law in all of Canada, so you can be held accountable by the law uh, for downplaying the Holocaust and making any comments or slurs or gesture that spells anti-Semitism. So just as Nicholas Thompson explained how they trick you with the Employment Equity Act is that they have employers or government workers or public service employers have to hire a certain amount of individuals who are from the visible minority group. And just as he just explained, they exceed the quota of the amount of visible minority groups that they are people who are from the group classified as visible minority. They exceed the quota, the minimum, but they don't. Black people are not included in that quota. So if you notice that nowadays, when we call public service call centers or what have you, um, or you go into a Service Ontario office, yes, they are right. They exceeded what's required of them to hire, but they didn't exceed that amount with black individuals. So therefore, they're following the law. But because there's nothing specific in the law, in the criminal codes or the Employment Equity Act that's specific to black people, the way it is for the ethnic group that has faced anti Semitism, they just brush it away. But it's up to us now to call them out because I'm not even going to say in a sense, they are fooling us. They just want us to be quiet and continue to accept our place in society. It doesn't matter how many years you put in of service to Canada as a RCMP officer, as a teacher, as a janitor, what have you. They designed their laws so that we feel that, oh, but it's there in the law. They have to hire a certain amount of members who identify as visible minority. Oh, it's there in legislation that anti hate is against the law for racialized groups. Who is racialized groups? Just as the ethnic group that endured torture and unimaginable brutality by their oppressors, have not black people faced that too? Not just in Canada or the US, worldwide. Europe had slaves that were beaten and stripped of their humanity, not because they offended society, but because of the color of our skin. Now it's time that we overcome our fear in standing up to the oppressor. We told you there's a petition where we are calling out the Canadian government on their false laws and all the things that they do to hide and obscure their ongoing desire to continue with their anti black hatred and racism, whether it be against our children in school, standing before a judge in court, at work, no matter where. There is not one black person who will see this video and say they've never endured anti-black racism or hatred in this country. So I want to say this, based on the fact that Nicholas Thompson is representing and advocating for public service workers, immigration officers, police officers, any member who works serving the public. It doesn't matter. As long as they are black, there's only so far they're going to be allowed to go. So you know what that means? When you sit down in the cafeteria, your coworkers could say, well, gee, I'm tired of black people playing the race card. Like slavery was so long ago. I wasn't there, but they can't say that. and engage in any anti Semitism because it is there written in bold letters. Anti Semitism in the criminal code, section 319, and what section 1 and section 2 under 319 is listed. Anti Semitism is against the law. That's why they don't do it. That is why we need to sign the petition and get into the House of Parliament and call them out on this. How long must we go on this way? How long? North America was built because your great great grandfather and your great great grandmother got whipped over their back. We are their ancestors. It's about time we stand up boldly and say no more. You done know.